Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we got ourselves a very special one here today, a new series that we're trying out on the channel, ideally on a monthly basis, but this is a segment we're calling Sales with GRAILZ. Now, if you guys happen to know GRAILZ comic books, they're a great Instagram account that does a lot of consignment for big books out there in the market, and they're friends and fans of the channel, and they thought it'd be interesting to do a collaboration where we talk about some interesting sales that have occurred over the last month. So in this video, we're going to do sort of the top 5 sales that have happened on their particular page and talk about them and see if we can have any learned things out there with what's going on in the market. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel, doing those things I would appreciate. But let us get into this video here today. Now, before I do the top 5 here, I kind of want to break down a little bit of why I think this is going to be interesting for us to review some of these sales out there in the market. Because of course, a lot of times we look at things like GPA and Go Collect and eBay sold listings and things like that. But that is only a subset of sales that are occurring out there. When we think about the auction house sales, I feel like, the people that are buying off of those auction houses are some of the more like hardcore collectors, or a lot of people that are sort of sweeping the floor, so to speak, are, probably comic book dealers that are buying things at like, a certain dollar amount. And I think a lot of those sales are reflective of that particular market. But the stuff that's going on, like sort of on the streets, on the Instagram accounts, I think is really interesting as well. And I think that there can be a lot of narratives that we pull out with some of these sales. Now, these aren't necessarily like the top selling books out there in the market or necessarily the hottest books out there in the market. They're just 5 interesting sales that have sort of been curated that I think are worth talking about. So with that out of the way, I hope you guys enjoy this segment. Let's get into the top 5. Now, the first sale we got to talk about is actually a few different sales of the same book, but what book are we talking about? Well, the one in front of you, this Ultimate Fallout number 4 Djurdjevic variant, the 1 in 25 that came out in 2011. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the first appearance of Miles Morales. Now, this right here is the book that is widely considered to be, the biggest grail of the modern age. I don't actually believe that there's a book in the modern age that sells for a higher premium than this one right here. And one of the interesting things about this is that this is one of those books that the GRAILZ team often tells me is one of the most sort of liquid books on the market. It is always in demand. It is so highly sought after that it's one of those books that, like, even though, a lot of modern stuff has been correcting a lot in terms of its value over the course of these last couple months, this is still a book that really commands a premium. And one of the reasons you can think about that is you can see right there on the slide, 707 universal grades, which is a pretty low number considering, what the modern print runs are for a lot of these books. And you can see right there, it gets even, harder to find, only 159 CGC 9.8. So GRAILZ had a sale recently for $35,000 at a 9.8 grade, which actually is pretty close to the record sale overall. There was actually a record sale for this book in June for $40,000. So while $35,000 is not necessarily the record high sale for this particular book, it is quite close. And considering where we are in this kind of bear market, that is a really strong showing for this book overall. Another interesting thing to talk about is that you had a CGC 9.6 sell for $8,600, which actually matches the last GPA sales data for this book right here at that grade. Now, the other thing that is interesting to point out is while they sold the CGC 9.6 for $8,600, they also sold a CBCS this last month at a 9.6 grade as well. And that one actually only went for $8,000. So a lot of people ask about, price differences between CGC and CBCS. And you can see right there, in back-to-back sales at the 9.6 grade, the CGC one commanded, $600 more, which is an interesting thing to talk about as far as, what people prefer. I mean, with everything going on with the PR surrounding CGC and now CBCS, it will be interesting to see how these numbers continue to move in the market. Will CBCS eventually catch ground with CGC, or will CGC continue to stay in front of the pack? But I think the large takeaway with this book is that it's simply just always in demand. I think if you ask the team from GRAILZ Comics, they would tell you that they would consign this, any day of the week. I mean, I think this is something that is always going to be liquid in the market. Even if it's not necessarily setting the record highs, it is always going to be something that people seek. All right, let's move on now to the second most interesting sales that were reported by the GRAILZ team. And those were actually for Avengers number 8. from 1964. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, you guys know this book by now. This is the first appearance of Kang the Conqueror. Now, while I started this video, I mentioned that, this isn't necessarily going to be a video always talking about the hottest books in the market. It's really going to be a video that's talking about, some of the most interesting narratives. But I do think that this book, has an interesting narrative, especially coming off of the heels of San Diego Comic-Con. I mean, as we all know, San Diego Comic-Con, they had their big announcements. We got the Ant-Man 3 trailer, even though it wasn't released, people were already talking about it. We know that we're building to Avengers Kang Dynasty. And for that reason, that made this book extremely liquid, extremely hot in the market, even more so than what it was selling for already. A couple interesting things about this book. There's 2,382 universal grades. I suspect that that's going to be a number that continues to go up once we get closer to Kang Dynasty. But what was interesting about this is coming off of the San Diego Comic-Con announcement, there were actually 3 sales to report by GRAILZ, 2 of which were CGC 3.5s that went for $1,000 each respectively. That $1,000 sale is matching the all-time record high for this particular book right here, which I think is definitely a testament that, FOMO and hype definitely is a big factor in how these books move in the market. I mean, everybody is thinking that, we had the height of 2021 and it would be hard for books to, match their all-time record highs or even sell above their record highs. And what we're seeing right here is that, this book still has a lot of potential out there in the market because everyone knows that, we haven't even seen Kang on screen yet, and we're going to see him many, many times. So those 3.5 sales are definitely strong sales out there in the market. Additionally, the CGC 2.5 went for $725, matching its 2022 high. So the 2.5 not necessarily reaching its all-time record high, but definitely matching, the yearly high, which I think is definitely a good testament for the strength of this book overall. And it'll be interesting to see where this book goes from here. I mean, I think we're going to see Kang the Conqueror many times throughout this current phase of the MCU, or at least the saga of the MCU. We're certainly going to see him in Ant-Man 3. I think the trailer effect is going to have a huge effect on this book when we actually see Jonathan Majors on screen. And then I think we're going to see him many times in other properties, in other films. I mean, why wouldn't he just show up in the Fantastic Four film on his way to Kang Dynasty? So I think that there's a lot of opportunities for this book to continue to go up in the market, and there's a lot of strong sales to support that people are feeling really bullish on this one. All right, let's go on now to the third most interesting sale to talk about coming out of the GRAILZ Instagram account. This one right here is Daredevil number 168 from 1981. And what is the significance of this? Well, this, of course, is the first appearance of the character known as Elektra. Now, everybody is going crazy for all the Daredevil keys right now. We got the announcement from San Diego Comic-Con that we were going to be getting, the Born Again storyline for Daredevil. And a lot of people are just anticipating that, it's only a matter of time before we see, characters like Bullseye and Elektra out there in the market. And the interesting sale for this right here is that they actually had a newsstand copy sell for $6,200 at the 9.8 grade. And that is definitely a very, very strong sale, in isolation. But one of the things I think is interesting is if you look back to the previous sales for the newsstand book, you actually do see a couple out there in the market that one went for $7,800, a couple months ago. And then at the top of this year, there actually was one sale for a 9.8 newsstand that sold for $13,916, which is absolutely crazy when you think about, the value range for that. And that really is the story here to me when we talk about this book, how people do prefer and put a premium on those newsstand copies compared to the direct edition counterparts, and how they can be, kind of tough to figure out in this current market because, there's not a lot of clear data when it comes to, the newsstand copies versus the direct editions. So you have sort of these wild sales with this book. Well, you have, one selling recently for $6,200, but earlier in the year, you have one selling for twice that, at $13,000. And I think it's because, people just want the newsstand copy, and anytime they see it or they see the opportunity, they're going to sort of pay whatever, the seller is asking for with this one right here. Let's talk about the universal grades. There's 5,356 on the CGC census, only 220 of which are 9.8. So that's a 4% 9.8 census when it comes to all the total graded books. And just to put that into perspective, how hard it is to get this book in a 9.8 grade. If we think about Savage She-Hulk #1, the 9.8s make up actually like 22% of all the slab books out there in the market. These are books that came out roughly around the same time. The black cover makes it so hard hard to get this book in the 9.8 grade, which is why, the direct, generally speaking, command around a $4,500 price tag. And that's sort of why, when people see those 9.8 grades that are actually at the 9.8 level, the newsstand copies, people are really, really excited about them, and they pay these premiums because of the 220 that are 9.8s, how many are newsstands? Maybe there's only a handful, and that's why you have such crazy sales data that is so widespread for the newsstand copies. All right, let's move on now to the fourth most interesting Grail sale that happened this last month, and that is for this right here. Yes, we have Tosin Aduye, Black Panther #3 from 2022, first appearance of Tosin Aduye, and the sale that we're talking about here is actually a 4 set. So GRAILZ had a set of 4 different books here. We had the 1 in 25, we had the second print, we had the Gary Frank variant, and we also had the Joe Jusko variant. And the set actually sold all together, all 9.8s, for $1,300. Now, to put that into perspective, let's say you were trying to piecemeal your own set of these 4 books and you went onto eBay. What would it basically cost you? Well, effectively, it would cost you kind of around that same price point. I mean, to get the 1 in 25 is going to run you $1,000. To get the second print is going to run you maybe $70, and then to get those 2 other variants, it's going to run you around the $100 or $120 range. So generally speaking, we're talking about $1,300 overall, maybe a little bit more since you have to pay all that tax and shipping. So, the buyer did get a good deal, but that is also a very strong sale. And when we think about this book, how it got, super hot in the market earlier this year, and everybody was, FOMOing over Tosin Aduye, it is very impressive to me that this book has been able to command still $1,000 at the 9.8 grade in the market. I mean, I think that is a very strong support floor for this book. Earlier in the year when, there was all the hype going on, the record high sale was $1,400, although there was only one of them. I think the general average for the sales of the book was more around the $1,100 and $1,050 range. So, getting a $1,300 sale right here for all 4 of these books, and there have been a couple other $1,000 sales for the 1 in 25 book, I think is definitely a testament to, there are a lot of collectors out there in the market that still believe in Tosin Aduye, and who really knows? I mean, if Marvel really supports this character and believes in this character and grows him into something that can be huge in the future, I mean, this is definitely one of those books that a lot of people think could be commanding Djurdjevic prices sometime in the future. All right, and the last interesting sale I think is good to talk about from GRAILZ Comics is this one right here, Silver Surfer #4 from 1969, a CGC 3.5, sold for $749, which is, a stone's throw away from the all-time record high for this book, which actually sold around $800 at that grade. Now, what is the significance of this book? Well, you guys know this is the classic John Buscema cover that came out in 1969. It would be the battle cover featuring Thor and Silver Surfer, 3,927 universal grades of this book. Basically everyone's favorite cover in Marvel comic books. I mean, this is just a staple for every comic book collector out there in the market. I don't know one person that thinks that this is a bad cover. And this is just one of those books that, people like to buy just for that alone. And I think what's cool about this book and what's interesting to talk about is that, anytime you have a key that is not based on spec. I mean, there is some spec value in this particular book. We do know Silver Surfer will come, and maybe that will draw more attention to this book. Maybe there will be a moment in the MCU where we see Thor go against Silver Surfer, and that will draw attention to this book. But outside of that sort of minor pop that's going to be created for this book, I think this one is just desired in the market. And to me, what it basically shows is that the support floor, the collectors that want to hold this book, is really strong, and that makes books like this very safe as far as investments are concerned. I mean, if you're buying a book, just because it's desired in the market or, that people just like, and there's no sort of spec value, it takes away that volatility, and it goes to show that this is a book that wasn't necessarily inflated with the boom of 2021. And I think that is definitely a testament to, how you may want to approach certain purchases out there in the market. I mean, yes, there's always going to be spec characters that you may want to jump in on the book and get in before they show up in the movie. But if you can find a book that is tried and true, and that's a blue chip key, and that you know is always desired in the market, you can feel pretty confident that it's always going to hold its floor. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Those were the 5 books from GRAILZ comic books. Let me know what you guys think. I think there's some interesting narratives to take away from this. I hope you guys really enjoyed this segment. I think it's going to be a really cool thing that we can do together. I mean, I just think that, there's some interesting things to talk about when we talk about, there are hot books out there in the market. But I also think it's important for us to analyze, what's going on in the streets, so to speak, what kind of sales are happening out there on the Instagram accounts. And so I hope you guys enjoyed this segment. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and we'll see you in the next video.